Hey, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be unpacking a 40-second Robben Ford guitar lesson about introducing some bebop phrasing into the blues. All right, first things first, who is Robben Ford? Well, if you need an answer to that question, the answer should be the very next guitar player you listen to with intent. The list of Robben's albums, awards, the list of stellar musicians with whom he has shared the stage is longer than a Monday, but in the name of this video's brevity, I will leave researching those accolades to you. The reason I'm centering Robben on this channel is because he's a legendary blues guitar player, an electric blues guitar player, whose hallmark, in my opinion, is artfully utilizing the styles of guitar playing in other genres and the playing of other instruments in other genres, particularly jazz and its many subgenres, and using those styles in the blues. He is a primary influence of almost all the modern day blues players who I listen to and study. So when Robben Ford teaches something, I listen, and you should too. There's a video floating around out there that's only about 40 seconds long. It's clipped up, and it's Robben giving a lesson about how to bring some bebop phrasing to the blues. The 40 seconds really doesn't do it justice, but bebop, for the uninitiated, is a style of jazz that was popular in the earlier part of the 1940s. That subgenre of jazz is characterized by fast tempos, rhapsodic improvisation, which basically means a lot of notes and fast up and down motion, if you were to write it out in musical notation, as well as harmonic complexity. So let's take a quick look at the video, and then we're going to unpack 4 specific items from within, because there are 4 great tidbits. There's probably more, but we're going to focus on 4 today that require a bit of a closer look.
Right there, I just played in an altered, the D7 altered, which I just played an arpeggio. So that's a pretty good example. 3, 4, boom, on the 5 chord. 1, 2. There's a nice little arpeggio that. So that's using kind of the bebop phrasing with the blues, you know.
All right, so let's start by learning the little phrase that Robben plays, and I'll put some graphical aids on screen for you as well as we move through the lesson. He's up here with his first finger on the 3rd fret of the A string is where this starts. So starting on that C, and he plays. Get that under your fingers. It's sort of in 2 parts, right? We have this, which is the arpeggio over the D7 part. And all of that has the altered stuff he's talking about. And then we have the resolution at the end. All right, so in the video, Robben mentions that he is playing with an altered idea in mind. Given that the video is only 40 seconds long, he doesn't really expound on that. So let's take a closer look and figure out exactly what he's talking about with regards to the altered tone in the scale. So first of all, what is an altered tone? In this context, it's a modification to the second, which is usually referred to as the ninth, or the fifth in a chord or a scale. In a dominant seventh chord, the ninth isn't present, so we know that that modification is being made to the fifth. And Robben is basing his playing here on this shape of the D7, or this arpeggio shape, which is the arpeggio shape for the 5 chord in first position, which is another way of saying that your first finger is at the fret of the song's key, right? So we're in G, my first finger is here, my 5 is here, and then we play the arpeggio up like this. And just so you know, this is a perfect example of why having your arpeggios down pat is really important, because a lot of this advanced blues playing is about modifying tones. You want to have the really strong foundational knowledge of how to play these arpeggios anywhere on the neck. I can help you out with that. I've got videos for all 5 positions. They're linked down below to at least get you started. So if that sounds like a good time to you, make sure you check that out. All right, so back to Robben. In this example, Robben is sharpening the 5th of the chord. He's modifying the 5th to make it an altered tone. And he's playing an A sharp, right? So this 3rd fret of the G string. That note right there, rather than, right? So A is your 5th over a D. He's going to play the A sharp over a D, augmented. And that is the altered sound. Now, he also does this. So this part right here is also dipping into these altered tones, right? Because I mentioned that if you modify the 9th, that makes the chord or scale altered as well. The 9th in the key of D is going to be E, which is right here. And Robben actually walks down F, which you might actually consider to be E sharp right here, aka the sharp 2 or the sharp 9, and then he plays E flat. So the flat 2 or the flat 9. Given the context of the A sharp that he played before, and the context that we have from the video, which is that he's playing an altered idea, it's probably not accidental. All right, let's talk about the second thing that Robben does that's very interesting and that we can take away from this short little video. He clearly states that he's playing a D7, but he starts the phrase on this C right here. Now, that's somewhat odd, but it is perfectly legal because C is a chord tone in a D7, right? It's the 7th. If you play it like this note right here is a C, just an octave away from what he actually started on. And starting on the 7th is interesting for a couple reasons. The first is that as far as inside notes, playing inside the chord, inside the key goes, that's the most dissonant one. The 7th clashes with the root, and it clashes with the 3rd, right? So here it is with the root, and here it is with the 3rd, right? Neither one of those is consonant. It's not pleasant to the ear. So when you begin with the 7th, you're getting kind of a peculiar sound that still fits the chord nicely. The second interesting effect that starting on the 7th has is specific to the guitar, right? It's supernatural to think D7 and then immediately find this D note to start building your arpeggio. And that usually means that you're playing the 3rd next. So if I go to find that, a D sharp, that's really easily found here on the next string, right? You can go down here for it. It's a bigger stretch. That's always been less comfortable for me. I almost always play these arpeggios starting from the root and going to the 3rd like this. However, if you're playing the flat 7, then the root, those 2 notes will always be 2 frets away from each other, right? Just like that, C, D. If you're starting with the 7th, you'll frequently begin your arpeggio phrase with 2 notes on the same string. And so if you're like me and you're used to starting from the root and phrasing up that way, this is likely going to cause you to phrase your musical ideas differently, which is often desired as we try to break out of creative ruts. All right, so let's move on to our third key thing to extract from this little bit of playing from Robben. Those of you who are astute, as I was going through the last point, might have said to yourselves, but in our example, Robben didn't go from the 7th to the root. He skipped the root and went directly from the 7th to the 3rd. And by doing that, he created the interval of a tritone, which I illustrated for you earlier, which is that sound. The tritone is the devil's interval, a pair of tones in such conflict with each other that there was a time that a musician would be banned from their church for performing them. Robben, though, now centuries removed from needing to fear exile for his musical choices, takes that tritone head on. So he's playing very dissonantly while remaining inside the chord. That's how he starts his musical phrase. And those first two notes are, again, perfectly quote-unquote legal and inside. But he's still getting an interesting sound without even leaving the chord. All right, so now let's talk about the fourth and the most important idea to take away from Robben's 40-second lesson. I could do an entire video, and I probably will do an entire video in the future to make the point that when you play a musical phrase is just as important as what that phrase is, the notes that are inside of it. In the blues, this idea is dictated largely by functioning dominant chords, which is a dominant 7th chord that resolves to a chord built 5 scale degrees beneath it. So for example, when G7 resolves to a chord built on C, in any context, that's a functioning dominant. Right? We can minor it, it's still a functioning dominant. More specific to the example we're working on in this video, when a D7 resolves to a chord built on G, that's a functioning dominant. The reason that this is important is because if you're able to understand that a chord is a functioning dominant, then you can also understand that a chord resolution is imminent in the music. At a molecular level, music is defined by tensions and releases. In this context, resolution is simply another word for release. In this style of blues, quote-unquote outside playing is just an act of creating tension. And it works well over these functioning dominants because by definition, the tension is released when the chord resolves. At least it should. It's up to you as an improviser to release it in your improvised line. So all of this is to say that Robben establishes the tension with all the things we talked about before, starting his musical phrase on the flat 7 chord tone, starting with a tritone interval with his first 2 note choices, this. And then he altered the 5th of the dominant 7th chord, and he added a few other altered tones in the more melodic part of his phrase that's not meant to be explicitly outlining the dominant 7 chord. But he does all of this in the span of a single measure of music, really just a few seconds of elapsed time before the music resolves to the chord tones of the G7, which is very much inside when he plays. That's just, he's making sure he's hitting the root, and he's making sure that he's hitting the major 3rd. He's bringing us all the way back inside because it is a satisfying resolution to a musical idea that was really sitting mostly, if not grossly outside the chord, very much outside the Western ear's expectations when listening to a blues. All right, so there you have it. We just took away 4 great insights from about 4 seconds of Robben Ford's guitar playing with a little bit of assistance from his own commentary. That's the beauty of studying the masters of the instrument, which is what we do around here. And Robben will certainly be featured on the channel again in the future. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it when that happens. Like this video while you're at it so that YouTube can spread the gospel of Robben Ford and other great players far and wide. I also want to say thanks to everybody for all the new subscribes and all of the commentary you've been providing, dropping me lines. I love hearing from you guys. If you have any questions, I try to be super responsive about it, and That's a big part of why I keep making these videos, is because generally speaking, I hear a validating voice in your comments. So thank you for that. Until next time, happy practicing, and I'll see you on the other side.